You'll see more of him later. We have a lot to cover on this dedication ceremony, so I'm going to go through this round real quick. I have about 5 minutes to do this. And so, first of all, what you're going to hear today, we have a memorial which is divided into 3 components. One component would be the 9/11 component. Both Todd Beamer and Mark Bingham were the point of the spear in going back after terrorists. They were the first people to engage the terrorists in the war on terror. And David Beamer, Todd's dad, and Alice Hogan, Mark Bingham's mother, are here to speak at some point. We'll hear them. Second component is the first responder component. This is dedicated to those who run toward the danger while others are running away from the danger. It's both the Chief DeSantis, the police chief, and we have also Tony Bowden, the Santa Clara County fire chief, and John Lochner, who brought our town bill back, 120-year-old bill, the old fire bill. You'll see that too. Then moving to the veterans portion of the memorial, you'll hear Frank Morris, who's a world-class artist. We were so lucky to get this guy. He's an Air Force veteran. He's a master designer commissioned by the U.S. Mint to do the gold coins. He did the most recent gold coin with the Indian code talkers. He also does presidential portraits, and I would have to rank him as probably the premier artist in our country. And we're lucky to have him here in Los Gatos with our premier first-class memorial that we're unveiling today. In the paper program, as you walk through after the ceremony, you'll walk through and you'll see papers. We've sold the first 120, many more to sell. As you walk in on pageant, you'll see a paper for Bill Benson, who was a naval aviator, flew his last of the gunfighters, flew the Crusader, which is a gun-mounted fighter jet, one of the few planes you could take on a MiG during the Vietnam War and win, until the F-4 guys were trained up. But he also went back for a second tour in Vietnam as a FAC, a forward air controller. And he's on the ground on the paper there, so you can see what these things look like. We'll take a look, because there are a lot of people in the memorial that have served our country and served our town very well. So that's a quick down and dirty on, let me show you what this is. On what you're going to see today and what we want to accomplish. And to us, this has been a project that's been going on since 2012. So we're happy to kick it off today. So Colonel Peacock, former Honorable Peacock, in the case of his civilian job, which is Assistant Secretary of the Army, and Colonel retired Peacock, Marine. Would you step up and introduce HR, McMaster? Appreciate it.
Real easy to say yes, sir, to Ken Hillhouse, because he does such a marvelous job of running things, leading them, and organizing. So one more round for One of the great principles of introducing important men and women in our society is the more important the person, the shorter the introduction. I'd like to introduce a Lieutenant General of the United States Army, West Point graduate, has a master's degree. He's written one of the most important books on the history of the Vietnam War. I read the book 20 years ago when it first came out, but it's now becoming another bestseller, and that is called Dereliction of Duty. It's a fabulous book, and I recommend it to all of you. And believe it or not, the general will sign it if you go buy a copy of it.
Beach reading is what it is.
It's not a novel, and one of the confessions I have for the general is, before I went on active duty with the Marine Corps 50 years ago, I worked for Secretary McNamara in the Pentagon, so he's not going to talk to me for the rest of the day. Any of you have read the book, you know what I'm referring to. The general is a decorated combat veteran. He earned the Silver Star in combat in 73 Easting, in which he was able to defend his own men, taking 0 casualties and knocking out about 24 Iraqi tanks from the Republican Guard. One of the last tank battles in the history of the war. General McMaster has also served in a civilian capacity as the 26th National Security Advisor to the President of the United States. Ladies and gentlemen, this is an American hero. Hoorah! It looks like I am a moderator up here. If any of you knew this general the way I know him, there's no moderating him at all. He knows one speed, that's full speed ahead. And with that, I'd like to just turn over a few introductory remarks by General H.R. McMaster, and then we'll throw this open to a fireside chat.
Well, thanks, Bill, and just thanks to all of you for the privilege of being with you, and thanks especially to all of you who had a hand in getting this great memorial in this beautiful place as a reminder of the service and sacrifice of our men and women on whom we depend to protect us and to serve our nation, preserve our way of life, and I think it's more important today maybe than ever, because our small professional all-volunteer force is at risk of becoming disconnected from the people in whose name they fight and serve. And it's a memorial like this, it's an organization like yours that helps us maintain that connection. That connection is vitally important because when we're valued by others, we value ourselves as a profession. It's an important part of our ethos, our warrior ethos across all of our services. And it's important because we need the American people to see both the sacrifices and hardships associated with service, but also to acknowledge and understand the tremendous rewards of being part of something bigger than yourself, being part of a team in which the man or woman next to you is willing to give everything, including their own lives, for you. And I think it's those rewards that oftentimes we don't really understand. They're less tangible than the sacrifices that our soldiers, sailors, and Marines are called on to make, and the hardships that they have to bear. And we need the best. We need the best of our young men and women to volunteer for service in our armed forces. And I think that this memorial will be very helpful in communicating to young men and women that also the tremendous rewards and the need for their service. I want to say quickly, I think that we are in a dangerous time. I mean, we're always, people always say that, hey, this could be the most dangerous time. But I think that there are several really trends that really place our security and place our way of life at risk. And I'll just highlight those quickly and then see where you'd like to take the conversation. The first is there's been a return of great power competition. Remember in the post-Cold War period when we were really flushed from the great achievement of the collapse of the Soviet Union, the end of the Cold War, then we had the lopsided victory over the 6th largest army in the world, over Saddam Hussein's army. And this was a period then that was ushered in a period of really great confidence. I think maybe even overconfidence, and an overconfidence that bred some complacency and a failure to recognize the need to continue to compete effectively. Great power competition was, remember, it was going to be a relic of history. There was this arc of history, many thought, that had guaranteed the privacy of our free and open societies over closed authoritarian systems. And then of course, we had a series of shocks, the mass murder attacks of 9/11, the unanticipated length and difficulties of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. And then also we should actually remind everybody to turn the phones off. And then of course the financial crisis of 2008. And I think this pendulum swung. Sort of the emotional impetus behind defense policy and our foreign policy swung from overconfidence, I think, and to pessimism, almost even defeatism, and a belief that our disengagement from complex problem sets overseas was an unmitigated good. And so, as a result, in part, of this ineffectiveness in large measure of our defense policy and our foreign policy based on overconfidence and then defeatism almost. We I think see the rise of really four, I think, critical threats in our security. The first is great power rivalry with revisionist powers on the Eurasian landmass, Russia and China. The second are transnational threats, including jihadist terrorist organizations, Islamist terrorist organizations, that remain, I think, an even greater threat to us today than they were maybe on September 10th, 2001. And the reason for this is that, if you remember, those who perpetrated those mass murder attacks on September 11th, they were the so-called Afghan alumni, the alumni of the Mujahideen against the Soviet occupation of Afghanistan. Today, the Al-Qaeda alumni, the ISIS alumni, are orders of magnitude greater than the Afghan alumni were, and they are seeking to get access to more and more destructive weapons. At the time when I think what we're seeing is what you might call the democratization of destruction, when these groups can gain access to destructive capabilities previously only associated with nation states. So we have great power rivalry, we have transnational threats, and we have hostile states, as we see with the actions of the Islamic Republic of Iran in the Straits of Hormuz just recently, as well as the continued threat from North Korea's nuclear program and missile program. So hostile states as well. And then finally, I think what we've seen are new arenas of competition opening up. Cyberspace as a competitive domain. What that does to place at risk much of our infrastructure, what we rely on, right? Our communications infrastructure, our power infrastructure. But then also the use of cyberspace for what we might call cyber-enabled information warfare against us. And this is the sustained campaign of political subversion that you see the Russians waging against the United States, European nations, in an effort to pull us apart, to pull our society apart and pit us against each other in a way that it reduces our confidence in who we are as a people, in our principles, in our democratic institutions and processes. And so I think these four areas of threat really highlight the need for the best of our young men and women to continue serving in defense of our nation, in defense of our way of life, and I think in defense of all humanity. So what you're doing is important. It's important to honor the memory of our veterans, of our fallen heroes, but I think what your organization does is you provide that bridge from our ever smaller professional force back into our society and the citizens in whose name our soldiers, sailors, Marines, and airmen fight and serve. So what a privilege it is to be with you. I'm anxious to hear what's on your minds and any questions you have, or comments or anything. Yes, sir.
General, speak to cybersecurity from your point of view, recently being in Washington.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's being taken seriously, but how do you think we stack up against some of our adversaries?
Okay, so one of the differences in our society and our ability to defend is that we are decentralized, right? We're not a command economy, and we're not civilized, and we're not centralized in terms of governance either. So really, you don't want to change that, right? That's what really makes us who we are, is that we have we put a lot of power in local governments, state governments, local governments, because they're most responsive, right, to the will of the people. That's the essence of our democracy, is sovereignty lies with the people. So what we have to do is determine how we can develop the kind of defenses necessary in our decentralized system. I think that the approach that's been taken over the last couple of years, which is to establish the standards and provide federal assistance to local and state governments, is the best way to do it. But I think all of us have a role. All of us should be asking the hard questions about the degree to which our power infrastructure, our communications infrastructure, our local governance is protected, right? Do we have the right contracts with the right companies to provide that expertise? I mean, this is a here and now problem. Look what's happened in Baltimore, right? Where a ransomware attack has shut down city government. I mean, it's already happened. And so we're behind. I think the good news is we've acknowledged that we're behind. The other critical aspect, though, from a defensive capability is we need systems that degrade gracefully rather than fail catastrophically. much of our infrastructure has been in place to put in the best and the latest technology. But we know from those countries that have come under cyber attack, Ukraine in particular, by Russians, to shut down their electrical grid. Well, the Russians succeeded. But then, the worker that was on duty went to the back room and took the big switch and turned it on. We don't have the big switch anymore. I mean, we need to make sure our systems can degrade gracefully. And I think the third maybe aspect of this is that our defense requires a good offense. So if you think about the surface area that's vulnerable to attack in cyberspace, it's huge. And if you think about hundreds of thousands, even more, arrows being shot at that surface area every day, that's kind of the competition that's going on in cyberspace. And so you have to be able to maybe, block the arrow, but you got to be able to go after the archer too. And to do it in cyberspace, but also to do it from a legal perspective. And under certain circumstances, from a military perspective, if that's appropriate and legal and so forth. So it is a new battleground, and I think we're adapting, not fast enough certainly, but I think what we have to do is how do we turn what appear to be our inherent disadvantages in this space into advantages in terms of the decentralized nature. I think what we're seeing is the private sector standing up, and I think that's going to be maybe our greatest opportunity, right? Is that all of us have to recognize we're all under attack, right? And we have to do our best. And this involves infrastructure, as I mentioned, but also obviously social media as well, and the use of social media to foment hatred, to pit us against each other, and reduce our confidence in who we are.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
General, you spoke about the authoritarian governments that are coming to the fore. I wonder if you have an analysis as to why these governments seem to be on the rise, and why the people fail to recognize the advantages of democracy versus the authoritarian issues that we have. And then we see our own leaders disavowing our allies and seemingly supporting those that we ordinarily would oppose.
Okay, so the rise of authoritarian powers, I think certainly the two authoritarian powers with which we have to be concerned are Russia and China. And in both cases, we hoped for a different outcome, right? And we supported reforms by the Russian government in the 1990s under Boris Yeltsin. A lot of people were optimistic, really, about how Russia could then maybe be welcomed even into Europe and into the West. Many of you played roles in reaching out to Russia and assisting them with the economic reforms, the security integration that could be possible if they were to decide to take that path. But those reforms failed, and there was a financial crisis in Russia in 1998 that kind of marked the collapse of that system. There was an attempted coup that failed as well around this time. And then what happened are those who were super empowered by the transition from socialism to capitalism really became kind of an organized crime mafia who all had dirt on each other and were about to try to take each other down. But there's somebody who had dirt on everybody, and his name was Vladimir Putin. And essentially what happened is he assumed the top position in really a protection racket in which he would manage the relationships among the oligarchs, and that's what propelled him to power at the turn of the century. Since then, he has consolidated his power, and he is at the top of this group, as well as the Siloviki, who were sort of the old Soviet KGB military, who now really form the top layer of his government. They are anti-Western. They believe that the worst thing that ever happened was the collapse of the Soviet Union. And what they are mainly concerned with is A, staying in power, keeping that protection racket in place with Putin at the top, and two, achieving once again the status of national greatness. Now, the way Russia is going to do that, I think, the way they're trying to do it, is to drag everybody else down. Okay, their economy is the size of Italy's or Texas's, right? And so, but they play a bad hand really well, largely because they're unscrupulous, but also because their goal is to drag us down, right? There's an old Russian proverb, right, where a genie appears to a Russian peasant, who has one cow, right? And his neighbor has 2 cows. And the genie says, "Hey, I'll give you anything you want. What do you want?" He says, "Hey, kill one of my neighbor's cows." You know, and so what I think Putin is trying to do is to create a crisis of confidence in Europe, to break Europe apart, to break apart the transatlantic relationship. And of course, China's different, right? China, again, we had a series of flawed, turnout now, at least in retrospect, assumptions about China. Our policy towards China before 1991, before the end of the Cold War, was based on dividing Russia and China, triangular diplomacy. After 1991, it was opening to China in the belief that China had been welcomed into international trade and economic protocols, and the international community would prosper, and that would see the benefits of playing by the rules, and that would liberalize its economy, and then liberalize its form of governance. It didn't happen, right? And in fact, what we've done is allowed China, by not playing by the rules, by being able to really, wage a form of economic warfare, economic aggression against us without us responding at all, except to actually aid and abet them in many ways by welcoming them into our research facilities, by transferring our intellectual property to them. This was an important arena of competition. Hey, we weren't even on the field. And so it's clear at this stage that what China is doing is a threat to our free and open societies. They're not only consolidating the control of the Chinese Communist Party here in the 30th anniversary of Tiananmen Square, it just happened. And what that party is mainly preoccupied with is staying in power. Okay, this is a political party that, under the auspices of the greatest misnomer of all time, the Great Leap Forward, the Cultural Revolution, killed 50 million of its own people, and then killed millions more to stay in power, and they're still in power. Why? Because of the tight grip they have on society, and now what they're doing is establishing internally a police state that goes far beyond what Orwell ever imagined in the novel 1984. They have 1.5 to 3 million people in concentration camps, and they are extinguishing individual rights and freedoms within China, and they're threatening to anywhere on the periphery, or what they regard as a periphery, in Taiwan, and you see what's happening in Hong Kong now with the response to this extradition law. So it's dangerous, okay? Because China has to stay in power. They have to tighten this grip on the police state, but they have to meet the expectations of the population. Okay, so after Mao, you had the reforms of Deng Xiaoping. Mao's ideology helped keep that party in power. After the reforms, you got communism light, right? To quote Dr. Evil, right? That was, it's the Diet Coke of communism. Just 1 calorie, not communist enough. So what do you do? What do you do to stay in power? What you have to do is meet the expectations of the people economically. So that's why they are doing everything they can to generate this kind of economic growth. They are now about to step into the middle income trap, where you have rising wages that make them less competitive in manufacturing. And to get out of that, you have to do one of 2 things. You have to increase your productivity, or you have to inject new technologies. They're not going to increase their productivity because to stay in power, they're doubling down on inefficient state-owned enterprises. So they're trying to get the technology they need largely by stealing it from us, right? And so it's time for us to compete effectively. I think that if you read Vice President Pence's speech that he gave in New Guinea in the last year, that lays out the strategy. And I think we're being effective. You mentioned allies. This has to be a multinational approach to both China and Russia, and it's happening, actually. Below the noise level, below the tweet level. Okay, it's happening. Okay, so if you look at, for example, December 20th of last year, we and 15 other nations called out the Chinese hacking organization APT-10, and those 16 nations put on sanctions against APT-10, and many of them announced legal indictments against them. That's really unprecedented. So I think I think it's happening, and there is a growing recognition. Even the European Union, which is not known for that stiff backbone about anything, called China a systemic competitor. Okay, so I think we've woken up to it. A lot of businesses are leaving China now. They recognize that they've been taken there and their intellectual property has been taken, and so I think the trend is in the right direction. It's a dangerous time though, right? How are they going to react? Will they to double down on the narrative of national rejuvenation and try to demonstrate to the Chinese people that China is taking center stage again after this so-called century of humiliation? They skip over the whole Cultural Revolution, fairly forward thing. But or are you going to see a tightening of the grip internally to China then as a result maybe of growing unrest? As I mentioned, it is a very I think dangerous time. Sorry, I'm going on too long, man, so I'm trying to, it's hard to remark.
What?
Big problems.
Last
Mr.
question.
Secretary.
Last question.
HR, why don't you make a couple of comments about the readiness of the armed forces for open threats?
Okay. Well, I think we are in a period of increasing risk, as I mentioned, and what we've seen Russia and China both do is they studied us really well. I mean, there were a lot of lessons. The lesson of the Gulf War was there were two ways to fight the United States: asymmetrically and stupid, right? And Saddam Hussein picked stupid, and so everybody learns from that. And what they've done is they're not trying to replicate our capabilities, our stealth capabilities. They're not trying to develop another F-35, even though they're stealing technology as much as they can. Instead, what they're doing is trying to take apart what they see as our differential advantages with space weaponry, cyberspace capabilities, electronic warfare, tiered and layered air defense capabilities, long-range missiles. That's kind of the suite of capabilities they're developing. What we haven't done is kept pace with some of those countermeasures. Because remember, we took kind of a holiday from history. We thought, hey, it's going to be fine. And then we had this narrative that we would always be dominant, right? If you look at the defense literature of the 90s, you can't, there's not a sentence that doesn't have the word dominant in it, and so it was hubristic, I think. And now it's time for us to wake up and recognize that there is a bow wave of deferred military modernization that we're coping with. So modernization is part of it. The other part is readiness and training, obviously. And I think you see the services working hard to regain readiness because of the reduced amount of training and also just the pace of rotations to overseas operations. And then finally, I think it's manpower and woman power. There was this idea that we could trade off the size of our force, right, for more and more exquisite technology. And we can't do that anymore. We need forces that are probably larger than they are now. Thanks.
We're back on schedule. Senator Beall, who's been a strong proponent for supporting not only veterans, but the VA and active component personnel, is going to come up and speak for about 5 minutes. When he's through,
Hi everybody, I'm Jim Beall. I'm the state senator representing this area. I'm really pleased to be here for this memorial since my family moved here because of the United States Army when my grandfather, who was a captain in the United States Army, he was in Mexico, World War I, 3rd Division, served in Alaska. And what happened was there was a guy that fell, I think it was a lieutenant, that fell into one of the rivers in Alaska. My grandfather got a big log, he's about my size. He stuck it out into the river and saved the guy's life, pulled him back in with the log. And then when the guy retired, he said, I think the guy's name was Smith. He said, well, where are you moving to? He said, I'm moving to this beautiful town in Valley of the Heart's Delight called Los Gatos. And so the Beall family moved here about 1931. And then grandfather retired from the United States Army. So that's how, because of the Army, is the reason we are here. And some people says that maybe a Los Angeles person should have said, grandfather should have said something to Los Angeles, and I would have not been elected for this area. My father, of course, served in World War II, and he was, and my uncle was airborne. My dad was a paratrooper and my uncle flew B-24s in Australia, World War II. And I have a picture, by the way, of my grandmother here in Los Gatos. She had a Los Gatos Red Cross truck. And they had a Los Gatos Red Cross working hard to support our veterans. And that's kind of what I'm here to talk about today a little bit, is supporting the veterans. And we have a lot of veterans that are coming back, and we have the Veterans Administration, and they just opened up a new facility in San Jose. I don't know if you know that, but there's a new facility that's now open in San Jose. And we want to support our veterans because guess what? We have about 20,000 homeless veterans in California. Did you realize that? 20,000. We have, we just luckily passed the Veterans Housing Bond Act, Proposition 1, which I'm proud to be the author of. On last November's ballot, we have now $1 billion for veterans, CalVet loans, and housing. And we just opened a veterans housing project in San Jose, financed by those funds. So we need to support the healthcare, the post-traumatic stress problems, build up our veterans center that we have in Silicon Valley. I'm going on a tour of the new Veterans Center. If anybody would like to go with me, let's go check out the center, talk to the staff, talk to the veterans, and find out what's there and what's needed to do to help our veterans. Part of this memorial, I'll set it up. You can call my office and we'll coordinate this summer. We're going to do a tour of the new Veterans Center that we have here in our community. I'm the chairman of the Senate Committee on Mental Health and Substance Abuse, so I'm particularly interested in that particular area, supporting for post-traumatic stress. It turned out that my uncle Ed, who granddaughter went to Afghanistan, and she's suffering from post-traumatic stress. And when she came back, she had a little baby born, and the baby was Down syndrome. So in our family, those kind of problems, you can think of the complicated natures of helping veterans involves many different things, including supporting the families, supporting the specific issues that they might have. So for me, running to the state senate, I'm now serving my last year and a half. I won't be a state senator anymore after a year and a half. I would like to honor today the Veterans Memorial on behalf of the veterans we've had here in Los Gatos. My dad told me he didn't talk about, he was a paratrooper, he didn't talk about the war. Oh, the only time I heard anything about the war was sort of late at night when I was a little boy. It got better when I became older, but when I was a little boy, I used to hear him scream out at night. And he'd talk about the glider plane crashes and other kinds of things like that. So I understand from a personal first-hand experience post-traumatic stress. And we need to supply as much support in our community for those kinds of issues as we possibly can. And for me, I'm real proud to be a son of a veteran, grandson of a veteran, going back to Thaddeus Beall, who was a Revolutionary War brigade major for George Washington, the Maryland line. That's how far I go back. So we're proud to be Americans, we're proud to be Californians, and specifically proud to have the families of Los Gatos here that served in the Army and all the different Air Force, Marines. We have a Marine right here from Afghanistan who's with me. Marine, right, Afghanistan vet. And he tells me all about kinds kinds of things I need to know that I don't know about, right? So let's listen to those guys, find out what their needs are. And thank you very much for this memorial. Thank you.
Our national anthem will be sung by two-time mayor for Los Gatos. We all know him. We love him for his singing he does every year at our Christmas parade, by John Lochner.
Please join me. Oh, say can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hail at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave.
Thank you, John, board member of the foundation that makes this possible. Please take your seats. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for showing up today and participating in this amazing community event. We're going to kick things off right away. We have a variety of people to hear from today, this coming together today. And first up today, we're going to welcome someone you're going to want to hear from, and that would be Francis J. Harvey. Francis served as the Secretary of the U.S. Army, in which he was responsible for all matters relating to Army manpower, personnel, reserve affairs, installations, weapons systems. He managed a budget of over $95 billion and over 1 million soldiers, personnel, and contractors. Today, he serves on 14 boards and is an advisory board member for the Veterans Foundation. Ladies and gentlemen, if you would, please welcome Francis J. Harvey, 19th Secretary of the U.S. Army and Board Advisor to the Veterans Foundation.
Good morning. Good morning. And welcome to the Flame of Liberty Memorial Dedication. This beautiful memorial honors our veterans, as well as active service members, first responders, and hometown 9/11 heroes, Mark Bingham and Todd Beamer. Veterans Memorial, like the one we have here in Los Gatos, as well as those across the country and many countries throughout the world, serve as constant reminders of the selfless service of the members of the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Coast Guard, and Merchant Marine. Today, there are approximately 25 million living veterans. Since the beginning of the Republic, over 42 million Americans have served in the military. Approximately 1 million have been killed and another 1.5 million wounded. And today, we live in peace and freedom because of the selfless service of these veterans. I would like to take a few minutes this morning to reflect on the importance of selfless service of our veterans, not only to our country, but to the rest of the world. Simply put, more than 1 billion people worldwide, and billions more yet to be born, live or will live in peace and freedom because our veterans, as well as those of our major allies, fought or died in foreign lands. And once the peace was achieved, our country helped rebuild destroyed cities, economies, and societies. In this regard, we Americans should be very proud of the type of country that we are, because except for the Spanish-American War, we have never retained 1 square foot of any country that we have defeated. The list of countries that live in peace and freedom because of our veterans and those of our allies is impressive and quite long. Besides our own country and those of our major allies, United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, countries we helped liberate include France, Belgium, the Netherlands, Denmark, Norway, Sweden, Finland, Greece, Turkey, the Philippines, the Republic of Korea, Bosnia, Kosovo, Croatia, Slovenia, Iraq, and Afghanistan. Furthermore, the countries we defeated in World War II, principally Germany, Austria, Italy, and Japan, were liberated from authoritarian regimes. And finally, let's not forget, as a result of winning the Cold War, a number of other countries are now free democracies. They include Poland, the Czech Republic, Slovakia, Romania, Ukraine, Georgia, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia. That is a list of 37 countries, or over 20% of all the countries in the world today. My first realization of the true meaning of selfless service occurred on a trip that my wife Mary and I took to France in 2003. During that trip, we visited Normandy and walked the beaches and battlefields. At the end of the visit, we stopped by the Normandy American Cemetery and Memorial, which sits on a cliff overlooking Omaha Beach and the English Channel. As we got out of the car and walked through a row of trees, we looked up, and there they were, 9,000 crosses and stars of David, all lined in parallel rows. I will never forget the sight of all those crosses and stars of David. As we walked through the cemetery, we both fully realized and appreciated that our men and women in uniform did in selfless service to our country during World War II. We had a similar reaction when we first visited the Vietnam War Memorial in Washington, D.C. The courage, bravery, and persistence of members of the military in those 2 wars was, in a word, incredible. The word persistence also accurately describes the actions of the Los Gatos Veterans Memorial and Support Foundation's Board of Directors over the last 7 years. After hundreds of hours of meetings, several presentations to the Los Gatos Planning Commission and Town Council, participation in numerous events to gain community support, the Flame of Liberty Memorial is finally a reality. The individual members of the board will be introduced a little later in the dedication ceremony. But at this time, I would like to recognize one member of that board that went above and beyond, and that member is Ellen Manzo. Her hard work and persistence were critical to the success of the memorial. Thank you, Ellen. Also critical to that success is the Foundation's president, Major General retired Ken Hillhouse. Kent is a Vietnam War veteran who served our country for 35 years. During the course of his career, he was awarded numerous medals, including the Distinguished Service Medal, as well as 2 Silver Stars for gallantry in action during the Vietnam War. The Silver Star is the 3rd highest military combat decoration that can be awarded to a member of the United States Army. It is now my great pleasure to introduce to you Ken Hillhouse.
This feels good. It's been since 2012 that we've been working on this project. Town of Los Gatos was kind enough to donate what we refer to as the Redwood Grove, this land, which, and then we've had several contractors and contributors assist us in building this. So we're happy to be here. During the course of this program, members of the foundation will come up and answer a question, which is why we are here, or why I am here. So you will hear and see a lot of the members of the board on quick response type questions. So all of that said, we're going to continue the program, move on to the next step. So I'll turn it back over to the MC. Thank you.
25 million vets. Is that an astonishing number to you? It is to me. It reinforces just how meaningful this is. And today, as you just heard, you're going to hear from the board members of this foundation. These are the people who step up and do the work. All the stuff that you see around you, all of this amazing stuff is because these people since 2012 have been working on this. And they're going to get up and one at a time, they're going to tell you why they are a part of this. And we're hoping that you'll answer that question for yourself and talk to some of them later today. Because this is the kind of thing that they want to be around for decades and be meaningful for decades. And to that end, if you'll please welcome the first board member who's going to do that for us today and answer the question why I'm here, and that would be advisory board member and Navy veteran James Free.
Thank you very much. Thanks for being here. The reason I'm here is because going clear back to the Civil War, all of us veterans raised our right hand and swore to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. And in that regard, we all wrote a check to our government and the people of this country for an amount up to and including our lives. Unfortunately, and at this point, more than 1.2 million men and women have given their all in the fulfillment of that pledge. And that's why I'm here today. Thank you.
We'll be hearing from all the board members, as I mentioned earlier. Next up, we're going to hear from one of our elected officials. We've got a few of them here today that are joining us. It's great to have that kind of support. Our first person you're going to hear from in the elected office role is Evan Lowe. He was elected to the California State Assembly in 2014 to represent District 28, and at the age of 31, he became the youngest Asian American legislator to have been elected to the Assembly in state history. He ran for Campbell City Council in 2010. He became the first Asian American elected to that council as well. And he made history by becoming the youngest openly LGBT mayor in the country at the age of 26. Please welcome Evan Lowe.
Good morning.
Good morning.
It's wonderful to see so many of you here. Mayor General, we are so delighted to see that you brought the great weather here as well for us to celebrate this important event. My name is Evan Lowe, and I have this distinct pleasure of working for each and every one of you, serving the town of Los Gatos and the West Valley cities. And as we heard before from our previous speakers, Major General Hillhouse has served longer than I have been alive in terms of his service. And as a millennial, it's important that we recognize the historic contributions of those that have come before us. Now, what is increasingly important about this is that this is an opportunity for us to remember. And similarly, when we have an opportunity to reaffirm our commitment to our country, it gives me an opportunity to think about my grandfather, who served as a corporal also. And he instilled his values of learning English coming from China and talking about the opportunities for our country and the opportunities that was provided. That was passed on to my father, who also served as a reserve as well. And then now to me in terms of our continued public service. So we are here to recognize the contributions of those that have come before us. But for those of us that are young and young at heart, let us again use this opportunity to remember our call to duty of that of patriotism and that of service. Having said that, we also had a distinct honor in the state of California to recognize a Veteran of the Year. Each member of the state legislature has the opportunity to recognize outstanding service members and those who have come before us. And of course, we had the opportunity to recognize Major General Kent Hillhouse. Yes, that deserves a round of applause. Major General Kent Hillhouse, for those of you who do not know, He is not only the president of the Veterans Memorial and Support Foundation of Los Gatos, but also distinguished with 2 Silver Stars, the Legion of Merit, and a Purple Heart, among the many accolades. Many of you know him not only for his leadership here, but also his countless connections and ensuring that he's going to hit up each and every one of you to make sure that we can have a thriving memorial here to our community. So having said that, on behalf of the state of California, to our Major General, first in Vietnam, then the Pentagon, and now here back at home. So will you all join me in recognizing the Assembly District 28 Veteran of the Year, Major General Kent Hillhouse.
We're going to hear from another one of our board members right now. We've been hearing from him for years. This person has dedicated, really given a lifetime of service to our community. And there's no stopping him. I don't think it'll be a surprise to anybody to hear that he is an Army veteran himself, having served 2 times as mayor and served in the Korean War and more. If you would please welcome board member and one of the driving souls behind this, John Lochner. John.
Thank you very much. I'm getting shorter all the time. I used to be 5'8". Anyway, you've heard the expression, freedom is not free. That's one of the reasons that I became involved in this Veterans Foundation, to try to feel the veterans that have served our country in the past and try to honor those veterans serving the country now and those in the future as well. And with our memorial here, we have made this possible for all of us to recognize and to honor those. And let me tell you something, the best way that you can honor a personal friend, family member, veteran, is to purchase a paver. I'm the paver guy. So far, we've sold close to 150 pavers. And anyone that purchases a paver, we will have that paver engraved and installed for you within the next month and a half. So you can go online and do this, but this is the best way for you to honor a person that you love, a veteran. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's fill this thing, right? Let's just fill all of these pavers up. You know, you'll be surprised to learn the numbers of people that are vets in our community here, that 25 million number. We have a significant number. Maybe you won't be surprised. Let's do it here in our town for all of Silicon Valley. Next up, another one of our elected officials. As a matter of fact, I remember when he first got elected. I remember sitting down and having coffee with him and saying, you ought to run for office, and him thinking I was crazy, but he did. As a matter of fact, the current mayor of Los Gatos, Steve Leonardis, was first elected in 2010. He was reelected in 2014 and 2018. He served as mayor before. This isn't his first time around. And I don't know if you know this about Steve, but he is responsible for installing over 30 flagpoles around town and painting and cleaning them and getting those flags looking good. If you noticed around town how all of a sudden they started popping up a few years ago, that was Steve going out and doing it himself. So ladies and gentlemen, if you would, please welcome the Honorable Mayor of Los Gatos, Mr. Steve Leonardis. Steve?
Welcome, my fellow Silicon Valley patriots. We are gathered here today in freedom to celebrate the continued success of the American experiment, envisioned by our founders, which continues in great peace and prosperity, made possible by the infinite sacrifices of those who served and continue to serve in honor. Just like the many different faces of Silicon Valley, this tribute recognizes local heroes and represents many diverse interpretations. For some, it represents healing. For others, remembrance. Then there is honor, creed, respect, history, friendship, education, heroism, charity, bravery, sacrifice, valor, love, and peace, just to name a few of the adjectives. But whatever one's interpretation may be, there is almost no way to quantify our enduring gift of liberty made possible by our military, our veterans, and our first responders, and all those who stood or stand to preserve our ideals and our way of life. Those who answered the call to duty and put their lives on the line for our well-being over generations. Their service must never be taken for granted. On behalf of the town of Los Gatos, I thank in earnest all those involved with bringing this memorial to fruition. So remarkable and grand, many, many thanks. A physical presence dedicated to the preservation of our liberty today and in perpetuity for our posterity. We can appreciate and reflect upon it daily and the awareness that it offers all of us. And for Silicon Valley, let our innovation continue to flourish. Let our daughters, sons, families, and friends live free and continue their lives in peace and prosperity as great stewards of our republic. And let us continue to bequeath the peace, prosperity, freedom, and liberty awarded by those tasked in its immeasurable preservation to future generations. Thank you. And I would like to invite up my fellow council members, Rennie and Marico Sayoc, to present Accommodation to the Veterans Memorial Foundation. And will Ella and Manzo join us, please? There are 6 lines on this accommodation. There are 3 council members in attendance today, and we are each going to read 2 lines each. We will start with Councilmember Sayoc reading the first line on this accommodation.
Whereas the Veterans Memorial and Support Foundation of Los Gatos has worked tirelessly over many years to bring a Veterans Memorial to Los Gatos. Whereas the Veterans Memorials at the Los Gatos Civic Center honors those who have served and currently serve in all branches of the United States of America.
Whereas the Veterans Memorial commemorates the heroism of 9/11, whereas the Veterans Memorial also honors our everyday heroes who perform work as first responders, and
whereas the town of Los Gatos is honored and privileged to recognize the important public tribute on the occasion of the Veterans Memorial Dedication Ceremony, now, therefore, the town of Los Gatos does hereby render with special appreciation, accommodation, and thanks to the Veterans Memorial and Support Foundation, dated June 15th, 2019, signed by all 5 council members. Thank you, Veterans Memorial Foundation.
Thank you, guys. Next up, we're going to hear from another board member. By the way, isn't it just great to have that kind of support from the town for this, right? The Civic Center doing this here. Jazz on the Plaza, and the chair of the Police Foundation here in town. When you come to Jazz on the Plaza, it's Diane who is in that booth, dressed head to toe, red, white, and blue, waving the flag, and she did it every week last summer and again this summer. So, Diane, why are you here?
I'm here because I was raised by the World War II greatest generation. My mother and my grandmother welded ships during World War II, and I had many friends who went to Vietnam. When I learned about this memorial, it was an opportunity to give back, and to say thank you. It has truly been a labor of love. The fact that we'll be an ongoing support foundation for veterans' causes makes it even more important.
We're going to move into the Flame of Liberty dedication piece of our program now. And to start us off, we'd like to introduce you to Chaplain Russ Ikeda. Russ, come on up here for the invocation. That'll be followed by Dennis Collins, who will sing Every Soldier Has One Prayer. And
face and a name that comes to mind that this memorial is dedicated. Allow me to pray. Almighty and vulnerable God, let this moment of dedication forever remind us that we gather as a community of indebted people, that though we may vary in particulars in personality and background, we share in general the desire to never forget those who have gone before us. Because of those who made sacrifices in the line of duty, may we live with greater humility. For what we received from their act of service, we did not deserve, nor ever expected. We are humbled that we stand on this side of the generous gestures that cost their very lives, while we remain to still experience the blessings and privileges of living in a free world. Because of these men and women who served our community, our state, our country, may we choose to live with generosity in our service towards those who come after us, the generation behind us, with the hope that the liberty and life we now enjoy, we can preserve and offer to them as we have received. Help us to be diligent in our efforts of service towards those in our neighborhood, community, and this country. Let us not tire to do good, nor lose hope to remain faithful, even when the challenges persist. And finally, because of those who serve this nation, may we above all live with a deep and lasting gratitude. From the time all of us here were taught to say thank you at a very young age, this should remind us that maybe gratefulness is not an innate expression, but a gesture we all must learn. We say thank you because it seems that we could easily take all we receive and have for granted, or assume we alone only are to be given credit. We stand downstream from those who before us, through their love and dedication, gave us solid evidence to say thank you. Gratitude, in essence, is not taking anything or anyone for granted. May we remember with humility, generosity, and deep gratitude this time of dedication as a way to commit ourselves to sustain for our community, our state, our nation, and the world, where peace, mercy, justice, and love will flourish. In the name of Almighty and vulnerable God. Amen.
I still see you waving as we sailed away. I can't remember if we said goodbye. In the eyes of everyone who left that day, I saw all the tears that I hoped we'd never cry. Destination unknown, frightened and alone, we hold on to home, sweet home. Every night I have one prayer, only God and I can hear, asking Him for one more day. back into your arms once again. I've been saving all our precious memories, knowing that someday we'd be apart. As we write another page in history, I'll keep you right here forever in my heart. Every star in the sky shines for you and I, until I come home again. Every night I have one prayer, only God and I can hear, asking Him for one more day, so I can find my way back into your arms once again. And I can feel you, I can touch you. There's no place on earth love can find you. Every soldier has one prayer, only God can hear. Keep me safe for one more day, so I can find my way back into your arms once again. I'll find a way back to your arms again.
Thank you, Russ. Please take your seats, ladies and gentlemen. You've heard her name mentioned a few times, and you've seen her on stage up here just receiving the commendation from our town council. And every single one of these committee members and board members works tirelessly on this project. But one thing you'll notice is whenever this woman's name gets mentioned, the people on the committee and the board all go, "Yay, her." That tells you something, right? When the rest of the team is cheering that person's name. So I bet that happens again, especially now that I've said it. If you would please welcome to say why she's here, Ellen Manzo. Please come back up once again. Yay, Ellen.
Thank you for the great welcome. I am here because I am a daughter of a World War II veteran and the niece of 6 World War II veterans, and they all voluntarily enlisted. And I see several other World War II veterans in our audience today. Fast forward, in 2008, I had the opportunity to feed a taste of home to 1,000 wounded warriors, and in my buffet line, there were 13 soldiers, 20-something-year-olds who had lost 3 limbs while in combat. That kind of scenario did not exist very often in World War II. The improvements in healthcare have given those individuals a life to continue. And so the paradigm changes as the platform changes. And one of the things this foundation hopes to do is to establish programs to bring support to veterans, service members, and their families. These individuals signed up for the reason that they believed it was their duty and they had a love for our country. And today, I and we all benefit from that. We owe our military members a soft landing return when they return from deployment. We owe them the ability to support and relaunch their lives. And I asked myself one day, if not me, then who? Thank you.
If not me, then who? I think every single person here. Would you agree? Yes. Right? One more time. Would everyone agree? If not me, who? Okay. What did John Lochner say? One of the best ways you could do this is? What? Talk to John Lochner. Okay. Hey, this is not only a meaningful organization that's going to keep doing wonderful things for our community for years to come, but we're also getting something else special out of it, and that is we're getting public art. And you know, that's why Terry Hope and I do Los Gatos Music and Arts and Jazz on the Plaza, is because we're lovers of it. And from the beginning, it's one of the things I loved about this, is that we're getting public art in our community, and that's a good thing. So next up, I'm going to introduce to you Frank Kocian Morris. He's the designer of the Flame of Liberty Memorial, the design that was selected following 2 National Arts Challenges that were sponsored by the foundation. If ever there was a contemporary version of a Renaissance artist, Frank's going to fit that bill. He's a portrait artist, an illustrator, a master designer for the U.S. Mint. And I can tell you that is a coveted position by artists, for only a few are chosen by our U.S. Treasury. And he's a designer of public art, clearly. His awards are just too numerous to mention, so we don't have time to do that today. But if you would, please welcome Frank. Where are you, Frank? Come on.
Thank you all for coming today. I don't know about you, but I'm having a great day. It's not even noon yet. But from the artist's point of view, I wanted to tell you that I think the sculpture and the memorial represent the perfect convergence of history and art. There's the American history, of course, and then there's also the personal history of our family. Thank you. Yeah, he's always making it better for me. But speaking of history, even though we had this ceremony happening today, I would like you all to know that we were able to physically install this sculpture of the eternal flame on its pedestal here in our memorial a few days ago on the date of June 6th, which is the 75th anniversary of D-Day. That was, of course, a momentous day in history for all veterans, a very meaningful one, and a day that literally changed the world. And then there's the art itself. This sculpture takes the form of an eternal flame. It has a special meaning inside, like a Fabergé egg. And the eternal flame is a universal and timeless symbol of honor and remembrance that's come down from the Greeks, and it's universally recognized. And so the purpose of this piece of art is to provide a sacred, serene, and inspirational setting where we can all come and reflect and remember our loved ones who served our country, and hopefully to heal ourselves as well. And finally, I'd just like to invite y'all all to come out later after dark when this memorial gets lit up. It's my favorite time to see this sculpture, and I think it's just magical. It's really spectacular, and so I think over decades, this is going to be a true beacon of honor that will always be there and shining for us to see. So thank you for coming.
Thank you, Frank. Hey, if we could have some folks head over there who are going to be helping with this unveiling, we're super excited to bring up our next artist. It's a person who knows Los Gatos well, a local Bay Area person. By the way, we want to stress this is a Bay Area thing. This isn't just Los Gatos. This is a Silicon Valley thing, folks. And he is no stranger to us. He has performed many times at our Jazz on the Plaza concerts. Please welcome 11-time Grammy Award-winning artist Tony Lindsay. Tony.
God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her with the light through the night from above, from the mountains to the prairies, to the oceans, white with foam. God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, my home, sweet home.
Ladies and gentlemen, you have just seen history created for Silicon Valley. Isn't this a spectacular acknowledgement of the service performed of our military members, past, present, and future? I think we can all agree we will remember the sacrifice, yes? All right. Absolutely. Thank you to the Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts, the Marine Corps, and our honored guests for participating. And what a beautiful, beautiful piece of public art. Thank you all so much. We're going to hear from another board member now, so please take your seats. We have a few more things to show you right now. If he would start making his way up. That's you, my friend. This would be First Sergeant, California State Military and Foundation founder and President Emeritus, Mike Frangidakis.
So the question is, why am I here? And you know what? I can't answer that question. Seriously. I cannot answer that question. Can you hear me? I can't answer the question, why am I here, to all of you, because I haven't been able to answer it to my own family for 50 years. And I'll explain something to you. When I was 19 years old, I got drafted. And I was living in Cupertino. I'm a native Californian. And when I got drafted, I was like every other 19-year-old kid right out of high school. All I was thinking about, I can't tell you what I was thinking about. But when I got drafted, it did change my life. I went in the service and I learned about what was spoken earlier: duty, honor, country. I never thought about that before. I was just a kid out of high school. I wasn't thinking about those attributes. But it was instilled in me. And then, a year and a half after I was in the service, I was sent to a place that was a very unpopular place here in the States. But then I learned something else about that place. I was in the medical corps. I was asked to be a litter carrier. I saw wounded young Americans my age, between 18 and about 30. And when they brought those helicopters in with all of those wounded people, and they were Americans, I looked around and I saw American flags all over the place on the base. I'm not a combat person, but I saw the people that were. And we flew out to fire bases and I saw what those people did. And I go, wow, those are young Americans. They're not any different than anybody else sitting out there. But they all have one common purpose. And every base that I ever went on, every military chopper or C-130 or Caribou that I ever flew on, always had that American flag, and it stuck with me. So if you ask me why I do this, I don't know. Why am I leaving Monday for Camp Roberts? Why am I 72 years old still wearing this uniform with a lot of pride? I can't answer that question, but I do it. My wife's been asking me this for 38 years. And my kids say, well, Mike, it's Christmas Day. You can't go to the VA hospital. What are you doing? Because General Ostenberg asked me to go on Christmas Day, because that's where the soldiers are. And some of them don't have their families there. So my family keeps asking me this question, and I don't have an answer. But when I was commissioned as a Veterans Affairs Commissioner by Mike Wasserman, and I realized that the town that I love didn't have a Veterans Memorial,
I went to the town council and said, hey, do you guys know you don't have a Veterans Memorial? And nobody was thinking about that. And guess what? The town council responded and they said, Mike, you're right, we want one. So build it. I had an idea. Ellen Manzo came along. I'm not going to mention all the names. They all kind of came with me. My idea became their idea, and their idea now is all of our ideas. Thank you for your support.
Thank you, Mike. Listen, we're going to transition to the next segment of our program. Can you tell what it is? It's our first responder segment, and just as they got called away to go first respond to something, I saw a chief over here, both the chiefs look at each other and raise their eyebrows. So to kick that off, I'm going to bring up someone who is a 60-year resident of Los Gatos, two-time mayor, current Santa Clara County supervisor, and that would be my very, very dear friend, Mike Wasserman. Mike, come on up, and he's joined by somebody he shares the stage with many times, Dave Cortese, also Santa Clara County supervisor. Gentlemen, let's talk about first responders for a minute, right here, Mike. If you
to be here along with fellow supervisor Dave Cortese to honor and just tell you all how proud I am of all of you for what you have accomplished. I am proud of Los Gatos. I am proud of all the people in Santa Clara County that have helped. I am thankful to our first responders. I am more heartfelt thanks to all branches of our military for all that you are doing currently and all those that have done in the past. We brought a couple of accommodations. We're not going to read these, but I am going to ask our police chief, where's he, Decina? Right here? Pete, come on up. And our fire chief, Bowden, come on up. We were given about 60 seconds to talk about first responders. Okay? Again, this memorial here, oh, and by the way, our plaques are made in the USA. Just say. And it's these gentlemen right here, these gentlemen here that lead our police and fire departments. First responders, 911 calls are every minute of every day. And these people and ambulance, they're dispatched and they go right into it. Smoke, gunshot, whatever it is, they go into it. The rest of us flee. These people and all the people that work for them are there to save your lives and do whatever they can do every single minute of every single day. And on behalf of the Board of Supervisors, my fellow supervisor Dave Cortese, thank you again for all of you for making this happen, and thank you for supporting these first responders in Santa Clara County. Thank you.
Continuing with talking to our board members here about why they're here, we have another one we're going to bring on up right now. Another good friend. Dueno, come on up. This would be somebody you all know.
I'm here to honor so many that gave so much for the freedoms and the safeties that we have here today. So many young men and women have sacrificed so much that I can recall in my short time here on this planet in Los Gatos. Across the street with my good buddies, graduating, partying, and the last time I saw them, they went off to war and never came home. I want to respect those people. I want to respect all military, all fire, first responders, police, ambulance drivers, anybody that comes out to help, because there's so few that give so much for our freedom today. I also want to thank all of you for being here today and supporting this program. 7 years of a lot of hard work put in by a lot of good people on the Veterans Memorial Board, and I want to thank them too. And again, thank you all for being here. It means a great deal to us all, and a great deal to a lot of people that have sacrificed a lot for us. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to unveil this monument here, and to do that with us as we do that unveiling, we're going to invite Tony Lindsay back to the stage. And if you would, please stand with me as we sing America the Beautiful. Tony.
Oh, beautiful, for heroes proved in liberating strife,
themselves their country loved, and mercy more than life. America, America, may God thy gold refine, and may our success be nobleness, and every gain divine. Oh, beautiful for spacious skies, for amber ways of grain, for purple mountains' majesty, above the fruited plains. America, I'm talking about America. God shed his grace on thee, and crown thy goods with brotherhood, from sea to shining sea, yeah. And crown thy goods with brotherhood, from sea to shining sea. Thank you, Tony. Thank you. Hey, photographers, everybody kneel if you're taking pictures so that those guys can see too. Thank you, John. And thank you to all of our first responders in our community. Our country is great. It's one of the greatest in the world. It still is. And it is thanks to our service members and our first responders. Thank you all. Please take your seats, ladies and gentlemen. Continuing with our board members, why they're here. Clyde Horn, will you please come up? Army veteran Clyde Horn, I should say.
It took me 50 years after my combat experience in Vietnam to be able to visit the Vietnam Memorial in Washington, D.C. Today, we now have our own memorial in Los Gatos. Now I can come connected to the generations of soldiers before and after to heal, to recuperate, taking in the spirit of all veterans, my brothers and sisters, feeling their spirit deep in my soul.
Thank you, Clyde. We're going to talk a little bit, just for a moment, about September 11th, 2001. Right? Who doesn't remember where they were? That's one of those just moments in history that we know. Well, we'd like to introduce you to two of the parents of our local heroic passengers who were aboard United Flight 93 on that tragic day. We're honored to have them here today. First of all, I got to know her about 11 years ago, and it's great to see her again here today. Alice Hoagland, the mother of Mark Bingham, and David Beamer, the father of Todd Beamer.
Such a beautiful morning. I'm so
glad you're all here to celebrate the lives of the sons and daughters of Los Gatos who fought in all of America's wars, along with two stand-up guys from Los Gatos, Todd Beamer and Mark Bingham, 13 years out of high school, who found themselves together again, not on the Todd Beamer and Mark Bingham, who found themselves together again, not on the basketball court or the rugby pitch this time, but in a pitching, hijacked Boeing 757, scooting low over hilly ground in western Pennsylvania. United Airlines Flight 93. I offer grateful thanks to General Kent Hillhouse, Ellen Manzo, Mike Frangidakis, Jim Free, Stan Weitzman, John Lochner, and all those serving on the Veterans Memorial and Support Foundation of Los Gatos, whose vision and determination have brought this beautiful memorial into being. I thank you all for recognizing how fitting it is that Todd Beamer and Mark Bingham should be a part of this tribute to America's champions. Former Navy man John McCain attended a memorial for Mark on the Berkeley campus in late September 2001. The good senator noted with pride the fist fight that preserved the United States Capitol building and saved America from having to read the names of its lawmakers on the rolls of the dead. Of those who fought, Senator McCain remarked, "I may very well owe my life to them." Islamist terrorists, instead of terrorizing our young men on Flight 93, were themselves terrorized, as anyone who had heard the cockpit voice recording of that flight can testify. The small pickup team of Americans, perhaps 4, 5, 6, formed up to take a quick vote and then acted on that vote. They ran the length of the plane armed with nothing but their fists and the improvised weapons they were able to enlist in their struggle. Buckled seatbelt extensions, fire extinguishers, broken bottles, breakfast cutlery, and penknives. Todd Beamer, Tom Burnett, Jeremy Glick, and Mark Bingham did not then realize what we all know now, that they were fighting for the lives of those on Capitol Hill who stood to be obliterated in a flash of fire and steel. UA Flight 93 was a glimmer of good news on a terrible morning full of tragedy. Our guys succeeded in saving the ultimate target of the thugs who held them captive. That target, if we are to believe 9/11 mastermind Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, was the dome of the U.S. Capitol building and all our representatives on the ground who were in or near it. On 9/11, Islamists brought their despicable fight to our shores. American civilians died by the thousands on that day at the hands of those terrible men. In the months after 9/11, patriotic Americans rushed to join the fight by enlisting in the Navy, Army, Air Force, Coast Guard, Marines, and Merchant Marines. Pat Tillman, local San Jose boy, Army Ranger, recipient of the Silver Star and Purple Heart, died after several tours of duty, honorably fighting to save us from the degradation of spirit and body under Islam that he surely must have witnessed in Afghanistan and Iraq. A remarkable irony of our democratic system, our freedom of speech and thought, is that in embracing democracy for all, we make ourselves vulnerable to certain groups and individuals in our midst who would deny us our freedoms. Our democracy bids us to allow everyone to speak freely and as they please, and to travel freely within our borders. Our freedom is a gift given to us by our forefathers, and we give that freedom back to all. But not everyone in America accepts that freedom with graciousness and goodwill. We must not let ourselves be distracted from the pressing task at hand. That task is sticking up for America, for our way of life, and our Constitution. Our beloved country is under subtle and steady assault from those who would do us great harm. That assault comes in the form of censorship and stifling of those who have the courage to speak out against Islam's motives in the United States. It comes in the form of ridicule for all things patriotic. That assault comes in the form of cynicism and disdain for respect for the Stars and Stripes and the rule of law. Todd Beamer and Mark Bingham, fun-loving athletes that they were different from one another in one significant respect. Todd was married to a beautiful young woman, and she had a baby on the way. In contrast, Mark was a gay man who, during his lifetime, felt fervently that America needs more heroes who are gay. In a remarkable twist of circumstance, Mark became one of those heroes in the last minutes of his short life, and I have become, because of my son, an unlikely proponent for the gay community, a voice in the struggle for all those Americans, including Muslims, who labor to change the cruel minds of their fellow Muslims who would deal with homosexuality by flogging, hanging, beheading, burning, stoning, or dropping walls on gay men and women. America owes a great debt to its athletes, amateur and professional, who put to use the fighting skills they learned on the high school football field, basketball court, and rugby pitch. Our boys refused to let the fateful moment pass them by. They acted, and by their act, we have all benefited. My heart goes out to the families of Pat Tillman, Todd Beamer, and all who have lost a beloved son or daughter in the struggle against a harmful ideology. I am proud to be here among you on this day as we look back to remember our American local heroes. Thank you.
Too, I'm very pleased to be here and have this opportunity in this beautiful place, in this beautiful part of God's creation. It gives me an opportunity to say thank you to those who made this happen. You know who you are. Thank you to those who allowed this to happen. You know who you are. And thank you, all of you, for the reasons to give us purpose and what it is we remember. We remember you, what you have done. If my dad, John Beamer, were here today, he'd be very pleased. My dad and 5 of my uncles went off to World War II. 4 sailors, 1 Marine, and 1 Army guy. Of the 6, 5 came home. The Army guy, my Uncle Jimmy, didn't. My Uncle Charles Benner, the Marine, came home, but he lost a leg in Okinawa. Subsequently, he was awarded the Navy Cross for what he did there. They were the greatest generation. They gave rise to the gifted generation, the beneficiaries of all that they did. In the days following, other wars, other battles, Korea, Vietnam. We have the opportunity here today to say thank you and to get stories from those Vietnam veterans who, unlike my dad and so many World War II veterans, are no longer with us. Take advantage of that, as we've been encouraged to do. We know about 9/11, and we know, and now almost 18 years since, how many more of our best and brightest and fittest men and women have served, sacrificed, shed blood, lost limbs, lost their lives, continuing the fight. And as my friend Alice has reminded us about, the enemy hasn't waved any white flag. The enemy has not signed a peace treaty. Our radical Islamic enemy continues their fight, not just with tactics of terror, but with tactics of infiltration, with tactics of legislation. Their goal to overcome, force all to submit, has not changed. We need to continue to be vigilant, and we need to continue to thank and respect those who carry on the fight. Our son Todd, Alice's son Mark, they got up the morning of 9/11 as free men. They weren't trained as first responders. They weren't wearing a uniform. They weren't in any of our wonderful services. But on that morning, in that circumstance, they became soldiers. They became some of the first to respond. They and others did the right thing at the right time. They launched and engaged the enemy. They launched a successful counterattack. They were not victims. They were killed in action. They did the right thing. I am so pleased that the citizens of Los Gatos have decided to include honoring these citizen soldiers in this memorial. I think that was also a right thing to do and a right time to do it. And you have a heartfelt thanks from my wife Peggy and the rest of the Beamer clan.
I encourage everybody here to be sure to go over and look at this monument today while you're here. Alice, David, if you'll please move towards the monument this time. We're going to do the unveiling. The unveiling of this monument will be joined by Ryan Hall, who's completed 5 deployments in Iraq and Afghanistan, along with Ryan's parents, Stacy and Board Vice President George Hall. And accompanying the unveiling of the 9/11 Memorial will be a Foundation Committee member, Grace Trout, and 4 of her students who will sing You Raise Me Up. She's an amazing local music educator. Grace, please bring your amazing children up and share with us.
When I am down and oh my soul so weary, when troubles come and my heart burdened be, then I am still and wait here in the silence until you come and sit a while
Thank you, kids. Wasn't that spectacular? Wonderful. Thank you. Please take your seats. George, are you back up here? You're on your way. Next up, we're going to hear from another board member about why he's here. That'd be George. He just participated in the unveiling over there with his son. George, come on up, my friend.
I was appalled at the rude and vicious reception that many of my constituents received when they came back from the Vietnam War. And I really thought that something should be done about that. And I looked for something that I could be involved in. And then Mike Frangidakis got up at the Rotary meeting and said, hey, anybody interested in helping me make a memorial here in Los Gatos? And I thought, perfect, that's for me. So I have the honor and privilege to be involved in this magnificent piece of work. And then I found my son decided to join the Army and to become an airborne Army Ranger. I got to tell you what it's like to be a parent of someone in Special Forces. Those soldiers and service people are not allowed to tell anybody, including the parents, where they're going, when they're going to be deployed, what they're going to do, and when they're coming back. So when he was stationed over at Hunter Air Force Base in Georgia, we would contact, talk to him, and then all of a sudden we would hear from him. So then we knew he was going to be deployed. And so we sat, watched TV, looked at the names of the people, the men and women who sacrificed their lives while in combat, wondering if our son name was going to be there, or perhaps a knock on the door that you dread, or a phone call saying that your son has been wounded, severely wounded. So doing this, I realized that the families and the friends of those who serve also need to heal. And so this is a perfect way of doing it, when you can walk through and have memories, and healing is a wonderful thing. And the fact that you are here today tells me that we all do care, don't we? And so I am honored to welcome you to your memorial. Thank you.
Continuing along with our elected officials, I suspect you don't realize that it was about 8 years ago when we transitioned our congressional representative from longtime Representative Mike Honda to longtime Congressional Representative Anna Eshoo. And we actually did the torch passing. We literally, Mike Honda handed a torch to Anna Eshoo right here in Los Gatos when that happened about 8 years ago, we figure. So if you will please welcome Congresswoman Anna Eshoo to the stage.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. It is indeed a privilege and an honor to come to this magnificent community and to thank all of you for what you have done. It was just a handful of days ago that I returned to Washington, D.C. from Normandy with the largest congressional delegation, bipartisan, bicameral, in the history of the Congress, that traveled to Normandy for the 75th commemoration of D-Day. In walking that cemetery, after all of the program, which was magnificent, and I think many of you watched it on TV, I was struck once again by how young they were. 16, 17, 18, 19 years old. Fathers buried next to their sons. Brothers buried next to one another. They gave their lives, their very short lives, to guarantee our liberty and our freedom. And a handful of days to come back home to this beautiful community, Los Gatos, that I'm privileged to represent, to join with each one of you and everyone that helped make this Flame of Liberty Memorial possible is very touching and moving to me. In this community and what you have done, generations to come will remember those that gave their lives again to secure our freedoms and our liberty. This Flame of Liberty rests and was erected in the heart of this community. And it's appropriate that it is in the heart of the community. But I think what it will always say is that this community has an enormous heart to recognize those that have served, the veterans that did come home, those that are buried in American cemeteries across the ocean, and that we here at home will always revere them, revere their families, because they too have made such sacrifices. Our first responders who work not just 8 hours a day, 24 hours a day is their vigilance. And to those whose families are here, the Beamers, David Beamer and Alice Hoagland, it was their sons that saved my life, because I was in the Capitol that morning when they took that plane down. So this is a family of Americans that are expressing their love, their gratitude, and more than anything else saying, we will never forget you. We will always love you. We will always revere you. And what you have built, as I said, generations to come will come to this place, and just as we stand on the shoulders of great Americans that sacrificed for us, future generations of Los Gatos will stand on the shoulders of those that created this memorial, this magnificent memorial. I want to now present a flag that I have flown over the Capitol of the United States of America in recognition to General Kent Hillhouse, who's being honored by all of you today as the Veteran of the Year, and also to present certificates of congressional recognition to Todd Beamer's father, David, and Mark Bingham's mother, Alice. Alice, thank you for your extraordinary remarks to everyone this morning. And I love your first name. It was my mother's first name, Alice. And to Frank Morris, the architect of the memorial. Let's all give them another round of applause. And with that applause, thank them for doing what they are. Thank you, everyone. God bless the veterans. God bless the families of the veterans. God bless our first responders. God bless the founders of this. And God bless our magnificent United States of America. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Next up, it's my privilege to introduce another driving force behind this wonderful thing that's been happening here in our town. And that would be from a Vietnam veteran where he served as a Marine captain. He served as a commanding officer in the Marine Corps Reserve where he retired a full colonel. In his civilian capacity, he served in the White House as a presidential appointee and later as the Assistant Secretary of the Army. To introduce our next speaker, please welcome to the stage the Honorable William E. Peacock.
When charged with introducing someone of great importance, the usual rule is to to make that introduction as short as you can. I could introduce our keynote speaker today by one word: leadership. This man has shown leadership at every single stage of his career. He is a West Point graduate, has a master's degree and a PhD from the University of North Carolina. He has served in the Pentagon, he's served in combat, and one of the things that he's asked me not to say, but I'm going to do it anyway, and that is he wears a silver star for a battle that took place in the First Gulf War, where he commanded a troop of cavalry. Now that's not horses and bows and arrows and stuff like that. He had 11 Bradley fighting vehicles and 9 tanks. And he came up over a hill and he looked out, and there were 100 of the Republican Guard. That's not a political party either. That's part of Saddam Hussein's most elite military force. He faced 100 enemy armored vehicles, tanks, with 11 tanks and 9 Bradley fighting vehicles. In 23 minutes, he destroyed 100 enemy tanks and not one casualty on the American side. For that, he wears the Silver Star, which, if you look up his biography on Google or Wikipedia or whatever, you'll see it's very prominently displayed. This man also came back and worked in the Pentagon and in different Army agencies, making the Army better and faster and more lethal in everything he did. His book that came out of a senior thesis for his PhD, Dereliction of Duty, is probably the definitive answer as to what went wrong in the Vietnam War. Now, I'm a Vietnam veteran, and I had to explain to him the other day that the people that he took to task were the chairman of the Joint Chiefs and the chiefs of the different services, who were bamboozled by McNamara and some of the minions that worked for Defense Secretary McNamara at the time. I had to confess that I worked for McNamara for a while, and then he's not speaking to me anymore. And anyway, with no further ado, Lieutenant General H.R. McMaster, the 26th National Security Advisor to the President of the United States. General.
Thank you, Bill. Thanks especially to all of you for the great privilege of being with you on this tremendous occasion. It is a great honor for me to participate in the Flame of Liberty Memorial dedication in this beautiful town of Los Gatos. My thanks to Bill and all of you for the warm welcome, and especially for all you have done to make this memorial a reality. This memorial will honor the memory of our fallen heroes and communicate to all veterans and those serving today that their fellow citizens value their sacrifices to preserve the liberties we enjoy. Our military is a living historical community. Yesterday was our Army's 244th birthday. Army strong. Our soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines serving today are determined to preserve the legacy of courageous, selfless service that they inherited from the veterans who went before them. They are particularly inspired by those who gave the last full measure of devotion. It is particularly fitting that this memorial is here in Los Gatos, California. Today, 1 of every 9 of our active duty servicemen and women are from California. To all veterans here today, thank you for your service to our nation. And about 1 of every 9 of the men and women who have sacrificed their lives for us since the mass murder attacks on our nation on September 11th, 2001, are Californians. They are heroes. Heroes who gave their lives in the noblest of endeavors. They were warriors and humanitarians. I thought that I might suggest, as we dedicate this beautiful memorial, that we use this place to inspire us, and that we use that inspiration to honor the memory of our fallen heroes with our deeds, as the Veterans and Memorial and Support Foundation has done, and strengthen the connection between our military and our society. We might resolve to help our fellow Americans understand that our servicemen and women are warriors and humanitarians. We might help our fellow Americans understand what calls young men and women to service and what inspires them to fight and sacrifice in our name. Strengthening the connection between today's small, all-volunteer force and our society is important because as threats to national security and all humanity increase, Americans are less connected to their armed forces than at any time since before World War II. This is a practical problem because understanding our warriors is important to understanding what our armed forces need to ensure their success in our defense. And understanding our warriors and the wars they are fighting is vital to sustain the popular will necessary to defeat our enemies and prevail. But fostering an understanding of our servicemen and women as warriors and humanitarians is not easy for 3 reasons. First, there is a tendency among some to confuse valuing military service with militarism. We might explain to our fellow citizens that ensuring a strong military with the best of our citizens serving in uniform is both an unfortunate necessity and the best way to prevent war. As the English theologian, writer, and philosopher G.K. Chesterton observed, war is not the best way of settling differences, but it is the only way of preventing them from being settled for you. And as President George Washington observed, to be prepared for war is the most effectual means to promote peace. Second, many believe that armed conflict is a relic of the past. In Europe, Norman Angell and others believed in 1914 that war had become so irrational a means of settling disputes that sensible people would never again fight one. The experience of World War I, a conflict that took the lives of over 16 million people, highlighted the need to understand the political and historical basis for violent conflict as critical both to preserving peace and ending wars. It is for that very reason, to understand the causes of war and the prospects for preserving peace, that the Hoover Institution, where I am now, was founded at Stanford University 100 years ago this year. As we know, the war that was to end all wars was instead the first of 2 world wars that marked the bloodiest century in world history. Third, Americans are increasingly disconnected from their servicemen and women, as well as the sacrifices necessary to secure our nation against determined and capable enemies. In contrast to today's wars, World War II involved all of America. The U.S. Army grew from an army of 190,000 to an army of 8.5 million, a 44-fold increase. A total of 16 million Americans served in uniform in World War II. Virtually every family had someone in harm's way. Every American had an emotional investment in our armed forces. As the historian Rick Atkinson has observed, the wars of the 20th century taught us that victory in war is only possible through sacrifice. So we might honor the service and sacrifice of our courageous men and women every day, as we are today, by overcoming those obstacles and explaining to our fellow citizens our warrior's calling, what inspires him or her to sacrifice for us, and why American servicemen and women are both warriors and humanitarians. It is important work, and we should all do our part to maintain the fundamental requirements of military effectiveness and help recruit young men and women into military service. And understanding the wars we are fighting and understand the warriors who are fighting them is necessary if in our democracy we are to make sound judgments concerning military policy. So, how might we go about our task? We might first point out that we are engaged today, as previous generations were engaged, against enemies that pose a grave threat to all civilized peoples. What we see across the greater Middle East is a humanitarian catastrophe of colossal scale. We know that battlegrounds overseas are inexorably connected to our own security. The murder of more than 3,000 of our fellow Americans on September 11, 2001 is etched indelibly in all of our memories. Since those attacks, our nation has been at war with modern-day barbarians. It is our soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines who have volunteered for military service in time of war, who will continue to stand between us and these terrorists who rape women, abuse children, and commit mass murder of innocents. They entice masses of undereducated, disaffected young people with a sophisticated campaign of propaganda, disinformation, and brainwashing. Fighting against these enemies is a noble cause. Fighting to defeat these terrorists makes American warriors both warriors and humanitarians. So we might help our fellow citizens understand better what is at stake. What is at stake in the long war we are fighting against jihadist terrorists? And we might help our fellow citizens understand better the warrior ethos, the covenant between members of our military profession, comprised of values such as honor, duty, courage, loyalty, and self-sacrifice. Ultimately, it is the warrior ethos that permits servicemen and women to see themselves as part of a community that sustains itself through sacred trust and a covenant that binds them to one another and to the society they serve. The warrior ethos is important because it is what makes military units effective. It is also important because it is what makes war less inhumane. The warrior ethos also depends on our military's connection to our society. When we are valued by others, we value ourselves. But popular culture tends to cheapen and coarsen the warrior ethos. Warriors and veterans are most often portrayed as fragile, traumatized human beings. Hollywood tells us little about the warrior's calling, the warrior's humaneness, the warrior's commitment to his or her fellow warriors, or what compels him or her to act courageously, endure hardships, take risks, and make sacrifices. Most Americans do not understand that our warriors are also humanitarians. I would like to read to you from a letter that the then mayor of Tel Afar, Iraq, Najm Abed Abdullah al-Jabouri, wrote to our regiment, the 3rd Armored Cavalry Regiment, as we departed Iraq in 2006. General Najm is now continuing to secure Mosul and Nineveh province from a return of ISIS. He wrote, "To the courageous men and women who have changed the city of Tel Afar from a ghost town in which terrorists spread death and destruction to a secure city flourishing with life. To the Lionhearts who liberated our city from the grasp of terrorists who were beheading men, women, and children in the streets for many months. To those who spread smiles on the faces of our children and gave us restored hope through their personal sacrifice and brave fighting, and gave new life to the city after hopelessness darkened our days and stole our confidence in our ability to reestablish our city. Our city was the main base of operations for Abu Musab al-Zarqawi. The city was completely held hostage in the hands of his henchmen. Our schools, governmental services, businesses, and offices were closed. Our streets were silent, and no one dared to walk them. Our people were barricaded in their homes out of fear. Death awaited them around every corner. This was the situation in our city until God prepared and delivered unto them the courageous soldiers who liberated this city, ridding it of Zarqawi's followers after harsh fighting, killing many terrorists, and forcing the remaining butchers to flee the city like rats to the surrounding areas, where the bravery of other soldiers finally destroyed them. The mayor wrote to the families of our fallen soldiers. We might reflect on his words as we return to this beautiful memorial to remember our fallen heroes, warriors, humanitarians. He wrote, "To the families of those who have given their holy blood for our land, we all bow to you in reverence, and to the souls of your loved ones. Their sacrifice was not in vain. They are not dead, but alive, and their souls hovering around us every second of every minute. They will never be forgotten for giving their precious lives. We see them in the smile of every child and in every flower growing in this land. Let America, their families, and the world be proud of their sacrifice for humanity and life." So when we return to this place, let us be grateful. Grateful that our nation has young men and women who are willing to serve and sacrifice to protect our nation and our way of life. And let us honor the memory of our fallen with our deeds as we find new ways to serve our nation and one another. And perhaps above all, may we cherish the freedoms that our warriors and humanitarians fought to preserve. Thank you. God bless you, and God bless the United States of America.
You start making your way up here. Stan Weitzman, one of our board members, is going to come up and answer the question, why am I here? You know, while he's coming up, a recent poll shows 55% of all veterans who come home after being deployed say they don't feel connected to their community. You've heard that word community a few times today. You heard it again just now.
Well, I'm here because my good friend, Ellen Manzo, who introduced me to my wife Sharon 9 years ago, called me up one day and said, Stan, could you come down and give us a hand? And she told me what it was about, and I said, I'll be there. I saw it as an opportunity to work with great people and for a great cause. And while I was working on this, I kind of became the mini historian of the group, and I started researching some of the graduates from Los Gatos High School in 39 and 40. And one of the graduates from the high school was Chuck Thalen, and he went to St. Mary. His family belonged to St. Mary's, and he was. We have a poster in the office that shows in 1945 he was still missing in action, and it turns out that he had gone into the Army Air Cadet program at San Jose State. And he'd become a B-17 pilot, and he was shot down. And we know that he survived, and he lived to be 95. Just passed away a couple of years ago. And Chuck told the story of how they parachuted out. Well, they didn't parachute out of the plane. They jumped and they fell for about 17,000 feet so they wouldn't get shot. And so I was telling this story to my next door neighbor, and he says, "Well, Ren Kiesling, same thing happened to him, and I think he went to the same camp." So it turns out Ren Kiesling lived in Campbell. His family owned a farm at Hamilton and Bascom, and Ren. So what happened was, it turns out these two guys both shot down, both wound up in a camp called Stalag Luft 3. Some of you may know that camp because that was the camp that the movie The Great Escape was made about. And Ren passed away, but my friend told me Ren said the camp they showed the movie, they had built it identical to what it was. And so we don't know whether these two guys who lived 6 miles apart and were shot down and both wound up in the same camp, and we verified this through Army records. They both were, and all the Americans, by the way, in that camp were moved to another camp about a month before the Great Escape took place. So that's why no Americans were killed in it, and because the Germans knew something was up, but they didn't know what. So my goal, my reason for being here is that these people, they're all real people. They were heroes, and this is so that we'll never ever forget them. And you should talk to your family. You should talk to your parents and your grandparents and find out about their service and what they did, and learn about it, because there's a story there, and we should never forget them.
Thank you, Sam. One more board member. She's right here as well. So we like to say, saving the best for last. BJ Turner, one of our board members here at the foundation. Why are you here, BJ?
I thank God every day that I was born in the United States. You and I are so blessed that every day we can live with the freedoms that we have. Thank you to the people that have served in the past, the people that are currently serving, and the people that will serve in the future to help us maintain the freedoms that we have. And may God continue to bless the United States. Thank you.
One more unveiling that we're going to do right now, folks. Missing in action. According to the Defense Department, POW and MIA accounting agency, at present more than 82,000 Americans remain missing as prisoners of war. Freedom, or as prisoners of war. Freedom has not come free. I think we all know and appreciate that. The men and women of this country who've been forced by circumstances to become prisoners of war truly know the meaning of freedom. They know it doesn't come free, and their story is one of sacrifice and courage. Their legacy, the gift of liberty. Please join in as we unveil our next memorial here. Several of our board members you've met already are joined by Lions Club President Kevin Johnson, who donated the MIA POW Memorial element. Thanks to those guys for contributing. And while we do this, we're going to introduce you to a military tradition. You're about to hear a 21-gun salute. And what this gun salute was established as a naval tradition in the late 16th century. A man of war would have visited a foreign port. It would discharge all of its guns to show that the guns were empty. And since The ship wouldn't have enough time to reload before it was within range of the shore batteries. It was clearly demonstrating friendly intentions. The 21-gun salute became the highest honor a nation rendered over time. And today, the national salute of 21 guns is fired in honor of a national flag, the foreign or chief of state of a foreign nation, a member of the reigning royal family, the president, ex-president, and president-elect of the United States. So, please stand for the salute and remain standing for the playing of taps.
Honor guard, stand up. Point arms. Left face. Ready, fire. Ready, fire. Ready, fire. Right face. Present arms.
thank you for your service. Remember, we're going to look at people in the eye as human beings, fellow community members, and say, tell me your story. And you're going to share your story. And we're going to just get to know each other a little better. And there's barbecue and fun and interesting things to do all afternoon here in the gym of the Valley of Heart's Delight. And to wrap things up for us, if you would please, he does not get the recognition I think he needs for wrangling this group together to do this stuff. The board president, veteran himself, General Kent Hillhouse, is going to wrap things up for us today.
So before we go any further, I wanted to recognize World War II veterans that are here present for duty. First one is John Kolb. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly. 97 years old, served in the World War II. Raymond Kolitsk, right in front of us, age 97. Thank you for your service, sir. Dick Manzo, right next to H.R. McMaster, World War II. Thank you for your service, sir. Ed Vincent, oh, there he is. Ed Vincent was a 22-year-old B-29 pilot who flew, I think, 37 missions over Japan at the end of the war out of Tinian. They took these 20-hour flights, wherever they were, but they were harassed by Japanese Zeros and other airplanes. Thank you for your service, sir. And we have one other name. I don't have the first name, but Sanchez, who's sitting over here, hands up in the air. There he is. He was on Omaha Beach on D-Day. Thank you for your service. Barbara Squire. Okay. Barbara flew airplanes. Was it the Women's Air Force or you? Women's Air Force Service pilots. She flew P-51s. She flew B-17s. She flew B-24. She flew B-38. She flew all the airplanes. They took them across the Atlantic. She's shaking her head, but I think you flew a lot of airplanes. Okay, Ellen Manzo, not so fast. Where did Ellen go? Ellen's been giving everybody roses today, so now it's her turn. Come on up. She gets embarrassed when she comes up here, especially when you honor her. This is from the foundation for all your help and all your service. So the last thing I'm going to say, well, before we close it out, is food on this side of the wall, being cooked by the Kiwanis Club. Thank you very much. Lions Club. I'm sorry. Oh, I'm in trouble now. The Lions Club. Okay. And the second thing is we have all these military equipment out here with their uniforms on of the particular era that they served in, and they're welcome to you. It's hands-on, you can touch, you can feel, you can ask questions. The lead vehicle there is an armored cavalry assault vehicle made at FMC. We use those in Vietnam in my cavalry unit along with M48A3 tanks. So I'm going to close out by telling you why I'm here. And I'm here because of a lot of people here have been to the Vietnam Wall, and they understand the healing that goes on at one of these memorials. I've been there several times, and I know a lot of other people have been too. And I knew that we needed one of these in our town. Not only the healing, but remembering those who've fallen, and also those who are in the military today deserve a memorial, and this is a world-class memorial with a world-class artist who you met to put it together for us, so we're just pleased to be here and serve the community. So thank you all. Feel free to eat up. See the vehicles, enjoy yourselves, and we'll see y'all later. Thank you.
Oh, beautiful, for heroes proved in liberating strife, who more than self their country loved, and mercy more
May God thy gold refine, and may our success be nobleness, and every gain divine. Oh, beautiful for spacious skies, for amber ways of grain, for purple mountains' majesty, above the fruited plains. America, I'm talking about America. God shed his grace on thee and crown thy goods with brotherhood from sea to shining sea, yeah. And crown thy goods with brotherhood from sea to shining